أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. This is study 23 of the Ramadan Daily Quran Studies for the year 2022, presented by myself, Zahid Aziz, on behalf of the Ahmadi Anjuman Islam Lahore, UK. And the topic of this study under charity is the institution of zakat. Zakat is not simply obligatory charity that you have to give. It is a state institution of a Muslim state. And where there is no Muslim state, it is a national institution of the Muslim community of that country, or it ought to be. The individual is not free to calculate and spend his zakat as he or she wishes. It must be collected by the state or by the community on a national basis and then spent by the state or the community. And where the Holy Quran describes the main items of expenditure of zakat, it mentions an item of expenditure on the officials appointed to collect and distribute that zakat. And this clearly shows that Islam, by instituting zakat, it had in mind either a department of the state or at least a publicly managed fund, a public fund managed entirely by a public body. The donor is required to give zakat to a fund which must be used for the uplift of the community. It was in this sense that the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ understood zakat, and when he became head of government in Medina, he made zakat as a state institution. He appointed officials to collect it, and he directed his governors in the areas further away to do the same in those distant provinces. And what zakat was an annual charge on property which remained in the possession of a person for a whole year. And it applied when the value of the property reached a certain limit, which is known as the nisab. Certain possessions were exempt from zakat. And zakat was levied more or less at a uniform rate of 2.5% of the accumulated wealth. Now, wealth has a tendency to accumulate in a few hands, and zakat aims at its partial redistribution in such a way that the community as a whole may derive advantage from it. So a part of the amassed wealth or capital of every individual is taken away annually and distributed among the poor and the needy. Where Muslims live under non-Muslim governments, and therefore the collection and distribution of zakat cannot be undertaken by those governments, this duty then rests on the Muslim community as a whole. And therefore, the institution of zakat must take the shape of a national Muslim institution in every country where there is a Muslim population. And the Holy Quran in a verse has laid down how zakat should be spent. In other words, on what objects. And the Holy Quran says, إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم, which translates as meaning that it starts by talking about or mentioning sadaqat. It doesn't say zakat anywhere using that word, but zakat is meant. It says charity is only for the poor and the needy, and those employed to administer it, and those whose hearts are made to incline to truth, and to free the captives, and for those in debt, and in the way of Allah, and for the traveler. And in the end, it says, Farizatan min Allah. This is an ordinance from Allah, and Allah is knowing, wise. Chapter 9, verse 60. And here, zakat is mentioned under the name of sadaqah. And in Sahih Bukhari as well, and in Hadith, the word sadaqah is often used when zakat is meant. And here we know that zakat is meant because at the end of the verse, as I have just mentioned, it is called a fariza, an obligatory duty from Allah. So spending zakat, as mentioned in this verse, can be divided into three main heads of expenditure. And these are spending it on those who stand in need of help of some kind, spending it on the officials appointed to manage the fund, and thirdly, spending it in the way of Allah. So all those items can be categorized in this way, which are mentioned in that verse. And in the first category of those who need help, the poor, as mentioned, is taken to mean those who cannot earn at all through some disability. While the needy, it mentioned the poor and the needy is taken to mean those who are actually able to earn but require some help in earning their livelihood. And these two kinds of beneficiaries are mentioned first, before mentioning the officials who administer it, because zakat was established primarily to help them. So this is why this verse says that this zakat is for the poor and needy and those employed to administer it. And then there are other people mentioned. And in the same category of those who stand in need, as mentioned in this verse, there are those who wish to learn the truth but need financial help to do so, as mentioned in the words, those whose hearts are made to incline to truth. So, for example, non-Muslims wanting to study Islam, as well as people who have made sacrifices to embrace Islam, such people may stand in need of financial assistance. But this could also include any students who need help, those whose hearts are made to incline to truth, who are learning the truth, who are in search of the truth, who want to discover the truth. And after that, it mentions the captives. So these are they who are in slavery or servitude of various kinds. And zakat can be spent to purchase their freedom and set them free. Of course, strictly speaking, we don't have that kind of slavery in the world today, but in effect, it still exists. And this would also include people who are trapped in oppressive contracts of employment from which they cannot escape without external help. And it could include people who are captives as helping prisoners as well. Then we have people who are burdened by debt, who are mentioned here, those in debt. And these, of course, include those who borrowed money due to dire need or through ignorance and are being exploited by moneylenders. And we have those at the present day in the most advanced countries of the world, people suffering in this way, unfortunately. Then there are people who run up gambling debts and they need to be treated for the gambling habit, as well as some institution to relieve some burden of their debt. And lastly, we have there's the mention of travelers who are stranded in a foreign country or in a remote place and are unable to reach their homes. So zakat may be used for such purposes. And of course, this is not just confined to ordinary travelers who are in difficulty and are lost somewhere, but includes these days refugees as well, political refugees from war. So you'll see that all these categories of people that zakat is designed to help, they still exist. They still exist in the wealthiest nations of the world. And in nations which have done everything, for example, to remove poverty through the welfare state, as we have in the United Kingdom and other similar countries. But these categories of people continue to exist. And the last three types of people I mentioned, those in servitude, slavery, etc., stuck in some kind of bonded labor, then those suffering from debt and those travelers or people stranded somewhere. All these are people who, due to their circumstances, are exploited, unfortunately, by other human beings. And Islam has therefore made it a fundamental of its teachings that the Muslim community or the Muslim government must assist such people. Wherever there are people suffering from any kind of deprivation, whether they're poor, people who borrowed money, people who are refugees due to war, there are always unscrupulous people there wanting to exploit them and take advantage of them. And therefore, the Muslim community or the Muslim government must come to their help according to this verse of the Holy Quran. And zakat money must be used for that purpose. So that is all those people that it's designed to help. Zakat is designed to help. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the second main category is expenditure on the maintenance of an establishment, an office for the collection, a ministry for the collection of zakat. And the third main category is right at the end, which is in the way of Allah. It's actually just before Just before the travelers, it mentions in the way of Allah. So expenditure in the way of Allah. And this is primarily for the defense of Islam. And in our age and time, it means the propagation of the message of Islam to the world. So those engaged in this work can be supported by the Zakat fund. But of course, the words in the way of Allah may be taken generally and may include any kind of charitable work which has not been specifically covered in this verse. So that is the end of this study. Rabbana taqabbal minna, may Allah accept our humble services in His way. Rabbana taqabbal minna, innaka antas samiul alim, wa tub alaina innaka antat tawwabur rahim. We pray that may Allah turn to us mercifully and forgive us our faults and sins.